Hello and welcome to Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams, an extra British Airways fleet news update about the summer 2026 long-haul timetable, which British Airways have issued a release about today. I'm going to give you the highlights and talk through what I think may be the implications of what British Airways have announced. Very little in here about short haul, either City Flyer, Euroflyer, or the Heathrow mainline short haul operation. What are the headlines? Well, I've sort of picked out Bangkok gets a year-round service with flights from London Gatwick. Quite a lot of capacity increases, but it remains to be seen whether British Airways will actually get the aircraft resolved back in traffic to make that happen. It's a frequency focus for successful destinations rather than a launch of lots of new destinations, but some of the 2025 service suspensions have been reversed. Let's look at Gatwick first then. The Gatwick fleet of 777-200s are redeployed and the Bangkok service gets a year-round proposition, 3 flights a week in the summer, increasing to 6 flights a week in winter 26. Kingston, Jamaica goes from 3 to 4 flights a week for summer 26. And New York JFK ceases to be served from Gatwick from summer 26. Now, I say that because that's what British Airways have written in their press release, so I'm sure that it's true. But actually, as I film and record this piece on Thursday evening, the day they've issued the release, the Gatwick to New York flights for summer 26 are still all on the website and still available to book. Now, that might just be an oversight on BA's part. Maybe they're just catching up. Maybe they'll disappear in the next few hours, certainly in the next few days, but worth just flagging that up. Normally, I'd have expected them to have disappeared pretty quickly. That is the Gatwick changes. Now, next summer, because they're not flying to New York, they do have the aircraft within the relatively small fleet of 12 to resource that operation, although many of you know this summer they've had to bring in an aircraft from Heathrow to add resilience, and maybe they may have to do the same thing next time. Now, unless they're going to deliver some service reductions for the winter, the cancellation of the New York flight will not support 6 flights to Bangkok because, again, as many of you will know and understand, Bangkok is a much longer flight and it's effectively a 2-day rotation from Gatwick. So they may be looking to move an aircraft across from Heathrow for the winter to support the Gatwick fleet, or maybe they have other plans. London Heathrow, North America expansion. Miami goes back to a double daily operation next summer in 2026, 1380 and 1787. Dallas Fort Worth resumes its British Airways flights. Initially, they had put that in as an Airbus A350, but that's now planned for a 3-class 777 with no first. San Diego and Austin become double daily. They've got a little bit of a hodgepodge of flights at the moment. I've not mentioned it on the slide, but worth also just flagging Las Vegas. That moves from 10 to 13 flights a week. So that's a reasonable increase, but not all of those flights are in the system either at this stage. And New York, if you sort of forget about the Concorde era or when they were messing about with the A318s, I think New York actually breaks a record from London Heathrow, 9 flights a day with the Gatwick flight withdrawal. And I've listed them all there on the table. British Airways have actually done quite a good job at spacing them out. Sometimes, if you look at airlines that want to increase the number of flights. They're desperate to do that, but very often don't get the slots they really want. British Airways, of course, has control of a huge proportion of the Heathrow slots, so it's quite easy for them to shuffle other departures around so they can space the New York flights in such a way as to maximise their revenue. So what they haven't done, though, is arrange them in flight code order, which is particularly problematic for my OCD. However, 8:25, 10 o'clock, 11:35, 12:35, 13:20, 14:40, 16:20, 18:05 and 19:40. They're all scheduled to be 777s. At this point in time, BA has just loaded up 777. I think if you look in some of the detail at seat maps and stuff, you'll see some are 777-300, some 777-200s. And a relatively brief update on the Middle East. Bahrain returns to a daily operation after 3 flights a week through the winter. That's going to be served by a 4-class 777-200. Slight surprise there. I'd have expected that to be a Dreamliner. I think there's something going on with Bahrain because it's not a destination that has done particularly well for British Airways recently, and of course they proposed to withdraw permanently based on that analysis, and now suddenly they're going to fly a daily operation there. I think there's been some political interference, some pressure on British Airways. British Airways don't always respond to that type of stuff. They're quite a commercial operation. So it'd be interesting to know what's been going on there. Saudi Arabia ramps up with 5 flights a week to Jeddah, 14 flights a week to Riyadh, and Doha goes back to 14 flights a week. That's 2 a day, of course. And Doha is the home of One World partner and equity owner in BA, who are, of course, Qatar Airways. And Qatar have just announced their own very substantial increase, extra 2 flights a day going in, 8 flights a day most days now, London Heathrow to Doha. So a very extensive operation across to Doha. And while I can't use this video to update on a detailed way for every separate fleet of aircraft, I know many of you are interested in the A380 fleet and what's going on. So BA had left their schedules in a position up until a couple of weeks ago where they only had 6 daily flights loaded, which a number of people were saying, oh, it can't be right. And of course, it turns out that it wasn't. But the position that BA are settling for next summer looks like a lower level of utilisation than we're used to, and clear evidence BA want to release aircraft to get on with the refit programme. So the use of the A380 on the Johannesburg flights has been very successful. I think the challenge for BA commercially is there is a Virgin Atlantic operation on a very small scale to South Africa, but of course South African Airlines currently not able to operate to London, and the traffic is quite strong on that route. So by using a very large aircraft like an A380, BA can service that. But it's not a particularly efficient operation, Johannesburg, because the flights leave London late in the evening. There's not much of a time difference. You get to Johannesburg in the early morning. The aircraft, both of them actually off the 55 and the 57, sit on the ground at Johannesburg all day and then come back that evening, arriving in London the following morning. BA seemed quite content with that. I'm not sure why they don't have a daytime return flight, because it would fit in with the airport opening hours at both ends of the route, but no doubt there's a good reason for that. So that ties up 4 aircraft. And then Boston on the 213, the 212, Miami on the 207, back on the 206, and the long-standing A380 operations, San Francisco 285 back on the 284, and Los Angeles 269 back on the 268. So you'll see 8 aircraft in service, 1 almost certainly released at a time for a refit, 1 on a D check, and that gives 2 aircraft for standby maintenance, possibly an additional refit or refit cover, so that if that is being done out in the Philippines, they can fly an aircraft out ready to roll into the bay as soon as the previous one finishes. So I think all of those reasons added up explain why they're only using 8 aircraft. I just hope the British Airways get their logistics together, because it's going to be really frustrating if they find themselves in a situation where they've not booked these aircraft out, they've not sold any tickets, they're ready at the end of March to start this work. Possibly they're going to start it earlier, but then the materials or the resources are not available. So that's the A380 operation at British Airways next summer. Going back to a more general picture across the fleet, I think those changes balance out at Gatwick. We suggested that earlier. Possibly an extra aircraft needed in the winter. Now, what I've not done, I confess, I have not been through every single destination on the BA long-haul fleet to scrutinise daily operation. BA have hinted at some service reductions that I've checked out. There may be more, but if there are not, it looks to me like the Heathrow operation, including the A380 reductions, requires another 7 additional aircraft compared to summer 25. Now that's quite a big increase. I'm suggesting, at a sort of guess, if BA resolve the aircraft that are currently stopped in the Dreamliner fleet for Rolls-Royce engine issues, that'll give them 4 aircraft back. They could not undertake any 787 fitment during the summer, and that might work out quite well anyway, because if the A380 fitment is in full swing, that's going to require a very large number of seats. The rumours are there's going to be over 100 Club World suites going into each A380. The first class product will be going in. The first class product's also going to be needed over in North America on the 777-9 production line shortly. So they may struggle to resource the 787 refit during the summer, but I think that aircraft may well be needed. And I'm sort of being bold and brash and saying maybe BA are assuming they're going to get a couple of the new 787-10s with GE engines in 2026 in time for the summer timetable. I mean, that gives them 7 aircraft. There is, of course, a difference between 7 aircraft and 7 diagrams existing in the British Airways operational plan. They're probably going to need 8 or 9 aircraft for that. So I'm going to scrutinise the timetable a little bit more, see what might be dropping out that I haven't yet picked up. But if there isn't anything else dropping out, British Airways are being quite ambitious with this plan and are assuming they're going to deal with issues that currently they haven't been able to deal with, like getting all the 787s with Rolls-Royce engine defects back in service, like making sure the Boeing production line for Dreamliners delivers when they say it will. So let's see what happens, and let's see how British Airways get on with that. But some interesting developments, some expansion. I mean, BA still supremely confident, it appears, about the North American market. And I think the UK position is different to the rest of Europe, and that therefore is why BA feel confident. Of course, it's pretty unusual for BA to publish a schedule for next summer at the end of this summer and then not make changes. So I'm almost certain I'll be popping up on your favourite YouTube channel to tell you about some changes to this plan. Maybe you already know what those might be, so do drop me a comment in the comments below. I know some of you are not overly keen on British Airways. I'm fascinated in why you watch my videos, but let's try and keep the comments focused on the BA network, the BA fleet disposition, and let's see if we can speculate a little bit on how BA is going to make this happen next summer and what else needs to change. Normal British Airways fleet update coming your way in the next few days. Look forward to putting that together. A couple of flight reviews heading your way as well. I'll catch you back on Mark's Trains, Planes and Trams for another update and another video of interest very soon.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and click the notification button so you don't miss any of the great trips Mark has coming your way on this YouTube channel.